You ready?
Yeah.
You ready? All right, hold on. Here we go.
What's going on, everyone? This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle, myaggienation.com, with a whole cast of characters here. First, with the Eagle, Alex Miller. What's going on, Alex?
Hey, guys. Good to see y'all. Been a while.
Yeah, for sure. We have another usual co-host. I'll introduce our special guest first. That is Brent Zwerneman of the Houston Chronicle. What's going on, Brent?
I think that was a good way to put it, Travis. Cast of characters. This is definitely a cast of characters we've got up here now.
Well, we're introducing.
That was very dismissive, Travis.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, but what I'm trying to get to here is the fact that co-host WTAW Zach Taylor. This is the first podcast as a dad.
That's a dad. Yeah.
Dad.
As a father.
Dad.
I've got that look about me, that half dead look in my eyes. You can tell.
Well, you're actually, the pictures that you posted of your son. He was sporting the exact same haircut.
He's
a
mini me. He actually came out rocking that do. I think mom has like brushed his hair once, so he's got that natural Taylor look about him. So Lord help him. He's going to be a hairy baby.
That natural East Texas look.
He's going to be a hairy man before it's all said and done. Comes from a long line of hairy men.
Did he have a little beard coming out?
Not yet, but give it some time. Give it some time. I'm waiting for those little stubbles to start coming in when he's about 11 or 12, and then he's truly a man at that point. Yep.
So Brent, let's start it with this. Brent, what is your, as the other dad on this podcast? I am only but a dog dad. What is fatherly advice you can give to Zach?
Hey, he's figuring it out on his own, but as he's seen plenty having been over at our house and hanging out and all those things, it's the best thing in the world. There's no doubt about it. I've experienced a lot of great things in this world. Best thing ever is being a dad. So that's my advice. That's not really advice. It's more of a statement, but take it as you will. And I think it's both. It can be difficult, but it's still the greatest thing ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I thought he was just going to say sign him up for Little League as soon as possible. But
get something for an outlet. Or get your kid really involved in theater or something like that. So yeah.
There you go.
Well, we'll move on to the things that the listeners actually want to hear about, and that is Texas A&M football. We have Brent on here because, of course, he is. We have a buddy, a mutual friend, and I can tell you about it later, who texted me and said he went out with some friends of his in Houston, the Houston area, out to have a bite, and they were just starstruck at the fact that this friend of ours had the Brent Zwerneman's phone number in their phone, because he is the man who has rocked the college football landscape with his breaking news. Brent, let's go back and let's just start with media days when the news was breaking, because this has been the first time that we've told the people this story separately, but for the masses, about how this all went down. We were eating lunch together. We were hearing Billy Lucci regale us with stories about his mother or something. And
who's awesome, by the way.
Everything seemed fine. Yes.
Yeah, Mama Luch is awesome.
Everything seemed fine. And then next thing I know, you're gone. You disappeared. You're out of the ballroom. What was that experience like, breaking the biggest story of the year?
Somebody asked me later that we sat with, and I can't remember who it was, said, hey, did you know about that when we were eating lunch and you just kept under your vest? And I'm sitting there thinking, no, I think it was one of our fellow TV partners, but I was thinking if I knew about that, I definitely would not be sitting at lunch. I would have been, having that look of panic on my face that I had for the next couple hours after that. It all stemmed, and Travis, I know you've gotten tired of hearing this story, but I'm going to say it again. It all stemmed from doing the 10-year anniversary stories of Owen Lofton's proclamation on July 21st, which is also my anniversary, so always remember that date. July 21st, 2011, he came out of a regents meeting at A&M, and A&M's president, and said, the Big 12 is in a state of uncertainty. And it was a calculated move on A&M's part at that point to say the Longhorn Network would cause A&M, giving A&M reason to look around and explore other options, and that other options were the SEC. So on the 10-year anniversary, I got back in touch with all those contacts from back when. Some I'd stayed in touch with over the years, some I hadn't talked to in years. and had a lot of back and forth across leagues. And actually, the story stemmed from that. But I did get a kick out of the idea that some people have said it was this orchestrated move by A&M on A&M Media Day. I'm fairly certain my primary insider on this, probably didn't know A&M was up to bat at SEC Media Days. So anyway, that's what it came from. And you talk about a coincidence, and Ross Bjork, athletic director, happens to be on hand answering questions. I asked him later, I said, Paul Feinbaum and others were making a big deal about you being here. And he said, hey, I went to 3 of those with Ole Miss as the athletic director. So he was just going to enjoy it and be kind of in the background, and ended up fielding a lot of questions. And that was Travis, you saw it up close, man. It was a circus. And I actually had trouble. I joked that, and this might be, it's definitely a dated reference. Maybe y'all get it, maybe you won't. You might as well have been playing the Benny Hill theme song in the background. While I was carrying a laptop. Yeah. Laptop in one hand, cell in the other, trying to get Wi-Fi on the most crowded day at SEC Media Days. Then trying to hook up my hotspot, couldn't do that. I ended up getting connection outside the Winfrey Hotel, looking up at that sign that says it just means more, and finally was able to kind of put it all together and hit send. My shoulders sag. I go back into the ballroom sweating, but not sweating because of the story, sweating because I was literally outside in the heat trying to get this story posted. Get back in, and you can kind of see it starting to take hold. Go to ask Jimbo Fisher a question, the guy right before me, I think, Trav, right? Yeah, from Florida. Ask, hey, Jimbo, have you seen this story in the Houston Chronicle? Texas and Oklahoma would like to join the SEC. And Jimbo said, I bet they would. So then they go to me, and it's, Jimbo, about that offensive line. Could you talk about that offensive line? So anyway, it was just in a way, a really comical scene that was very disorganized on my side and everything, far from a well-orchestrated, well-oiled machine by any means.
Well, the other side of that I've told on some occasions too was, so you disappear, and from time to time, me, Robert Sesson, we always usually kind of sit on the same row at media days, and you disappear. And I thought maybe you're gonna go get a nice Dr. Pepper Zero or something out there, but then you come back kind of in a panic, and you grab your laptop and go, and that's when I kind of look over at Cease and we're like, what's going on? This is, should we be on top of something here? And the only thing that I could logically put my mind together was that, of course, A&M was in the building, and there is times where, as local media, we get a little side conversation with the players and coaches beforehand at media days. This year, it was a little different because of COVID, and so I was worried that maybe there'd been an aside, or you were getting a one-on-one, or I was missing something. So I spent the next hour and a half running around all the nooks and crannies of the hotel that you could possibly be, trying to figure out what was going on. And then finally, after about an hour of, running around, I sit down and, sigh and say, I don't know where he is. And then your tweet pops up, and it was kind of funny because you go, oh, it's just that. Okay, whatever. And then you're like, wait, it's just that. Okay, hold on. I gotta go do some more running. So yeah, that was the fun other half of that, at media days.
Yeah, the fact that it happened at SEC Media Days on Alabama/Texas A&M/ almost said Texas Tech / Mike Leach Day just added to the whole circus atmosphere, and it was just by coincidence, but man, what a what a setting it became where, Ross Bjork is suddenly getting bombarded, and Greg Sankey, and that was another thing when it came down. Normally I would have to place a call to the SEC office, so forth, try to reach out to Greg Sankey any way I could. All I had to do was go down to Radio Row when I got wind of this, and found him on Radio Row, and got my, first of all, a look like that, and then rumors are swirling. Okay, is that on the record? Well, let's go no comment. And I go, whoa, there's definitely something to this. So once we had that, we felt like we could press forward, and then we got a no comment from a Texas official, and then Greg Sankey was swamped after that.
Yeah, well, Zach, I know you had something. I'll let you get to it, but the other side of that too was, after it all came out, I ran out. We go out. We find Ross Bjork, A&M AD. He gets off the phone with President Banks, and we're asking him questions. Me, Dennis Dodd, Ross Dellinger were all kind of gathered around him. Chuck Carlton gathered around him. So as soon as we get done with that, these players and coaches and the committee, they all are shuttled in and out of these different rooms and ballrooms on the same floor. And I think it was Dennis Dodd who, as soon as we got done with Ross, looked up and saw that Commissioner Greg Sankey was getting shuttled between two rooms and goes, "Hey, there's Greg. Let's get him." and the whole mass just kind of runs over, and he starts like hauling his, "I have no comment on that speculation," and just like runs into a door. So that was outside after this all, but I will always remember, I think it was Dennis Dodd going, "Hey, there's Greg, let's get him." Like it's,
I really hope that's on video.
Yeah.
I really hope that's on video somewhere.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, let's go at him. And just everybody starts running. Question that I had, Brent, and maybe you can share some insight into this. Obviously, great a job by you just to get first on this story. But, I mean, the way that you understand it, how long was the SEC in Texas and Oklahoma, how long do you think they were planning on sitting on this before actually, finally telling folks, hey, this is the plan we have in place?
It was kept in a very tight circle, and I do think, even as my insider said, this could happen within a couple of weeks, which was what I put in the original story. The idea was, I think Sankey was just hoping, crossing his fingers to get through SEC media days, it being kept quiet, and then that following week, that essentially it would be sprang upon,
Gotcha.
The Big 12. Essentially, here's these letters saying that we no longer want to be a part of this after 2025. The other part of all that is I call it realignment 101 from 10 years ago, having seen A&M up close and personal do this. The idea when A&M first announced was that it would be 2-3 years. Well, that quickly accelerated to 1 year. Within less than a year after Lofton made that proclamation, they're in the SEC. This is a much more complicated situation, but also seeing it accelerating. There is no way in the world that 3 years from now, we're talking about Texas and OU going into their final year of the Big 12 and getting ready for the SEC. There's just no way. In fact, I still think, I have a gut feeling it's going to be 2022. I do think they were going to, the idea was that they spring it upon the Big 12, or maybe that it had leaked out by then, but he was hoping to get through SEC media days and not have to kind of field those questions on site. And that become the prevailing topic as opposed to getting these other teams through. Because by then, let's see, that was Wednesday. So you were down to Wednesday and Thursday, the last 2 days of media days at that point. He didn't quite make it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Wanting to highlight your teams, not necessarily provide that kind of distraction, but either way, I mean, the news broke, and you obviously did a great job on getting it out there. And then I wanted to know, this was your anniversary. What does your wife think about you making it all about yourself on this particular day? I want to know Crystal's thoughts on this.
We are still planning on celebrating our anniversary. And I will say, in 14 years of bliss, this is the longest we've waited to celebrate, but there have been extenuating circumstances. So just like she was 10 years ago, she was very cool with it then when Lofton dropped that on us outside the Regents meeting. And next thing you know, we're writing all about realignment into the night. It was the same type deal. Of course, I'd already planned to be gone on for SEC media days for our anniversary. So I told her I would certainly make it up to her along the way, and I'm still making those plans at this point.
Good.
Let's go around the horn with this. I think the first part of this is pretty obvious, but we'll throw it out there just for the comment. I'm kind of more curious to the second part of this, and that is, how does the move of Texas and OU to the SEC affect the SEC, affect A&M, affect how that capsule of college football is moving forward? But then how does this move affect college football as a whole, Division I as a whole? And is it a good or a bad thing? Brent, what do you think?
My first thought when I heard this, and I'm a simpleton 10 years ago, my whole thought at the time was A&M and the SEC. Man, those road trips are going to be awesome. My first thought when I heard this was, hey, that means the game is back. And the game to me, as a fifth-generation Texan, is A&M versus Texas every year. And, and they're smart enough to realize that's a game. If you're going to have them in the same conference, it needs to be annually, and it needs to be on Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving weekend around that. So that was my prevailing thought. And from the SEC side of things, I know some Aggies were mad and everything, but you can't blame them for wanting to bring on these two, and I say traditional powerhouses, just to the west of the Sabine River and add to it and become that first 16-team super conference. Because if they don't go to the SEC, then where are they going, the Big Ten or the ACC? And so it's certainly, there's no two ways about it. It strengthened the SEC. That was my whole thought. I'm still wondering how exactly they're going to divide it up. My personal hope is it's divisions, 8-8, Alabama, Auburn go east, and then, and those teams do play every year like LSU. And when you start getting into that pod thing, it almost becomes like an old Southwest Conference or Big 12 in a way, if you're talking about Arkansas and Oklahoma and Texas and Texas A&M all together in one. So to me, that's not quite as exciting as maybe 8-8.
Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll go for the second part of that question. This is obviously the first domino to fall of potentially the next huge wave of realignment. I'm just really curious what happens with the Big 12. There's been the reports of the Pac-12 and the Big 12 meeting to talk about a merger or a scheduling alliance. I think whatever happens to the Big 12, that's going to play a big role in the future of college football. Could you see a team like Kansas going to the Big 10 because of basketball? Is there another team from the Big 12 that would follow the Jayhawks that way to make it 16 in the Big 10? What happens to a West Virginia if, the Pac-12 is interested? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for West Virginia to go all the way across the country half the time to play all these teams in the Pacific time zone. It's going to be interesting to see if the Big 12 can find a way to stick together, which seems kind of skeptical. But then, okay, how do the pieces kind of divide, and how does it all shake out, and who picks up what pieces, and how valuable do those different schools become wherever they land?
Zach?
So my thoughts on how does it affect the SEC, in particular Texas A&M, recruiting has been talked about pretty heavily ever since UT and Oklahoma have joined the fray, and people are talking about, well, now Texas is going to have that advantage because obviously recruits are going to pick Austin over College Station. Why would they want to go to Texas A&M instead of the University of Texas, or why would they rather go to A&M than Oklahoma? I think there very well have been some recruits in the past that have picked Texas A&M solely because of the SEC. I'm not going to say how many because that's a number that we were never going to know. But that obviously was a big selling point. Now, that being said, I think there are other things that Texas A&M sells that maybe Texas does not. Believe it or not every kid wants to live in a big city in college. They love being the kings of campus, not saying that they aren't to some degree at UT, but I think there are things that Texas A&M can sell now with the facilities, obviously with the coach, with recent success that Texas doesn't necessarily have. That being said, with Oklahoma and Texas joining now, 16 teams is going to have to be the norm. I can't see other conferences saying, okay, we've got the big, bad, powerful SEC, which was already the most powerful conference, has now beefed up with two huge programs, bringing in a ton of money, and we're just going to stand pat and we're not going to do anything to add to our ranks. That's just not going to happen. And so, I like Alex said, the Big Ten, you can see Kansas from the basketball perspective, Iowa State also joining the Big Ten. I think that just makes sense. West Virginia joining the ACC, get that Pitt-West Virginia matchup back, and how the rest of things shake out as far as the Pac-12 goes. And the other question was, the Pac-12 has no church schools. They have no schools that have a religious affiliation. Private schools. So, what happens to the TCUs and Baylors of the world? Do they end up joining the Pac-12 or do they go somewhere else? So the dynamics of these conferences all vying for power now and seeing that the SEC is more or less leaving them in the dust, they've got to be able to catch up. And to do that, they've got to grow their numbers. But from how is it going to directly affect Texas A&M? There are a lot of people kind of running around saying, oh, well, now A&M no longer has that advantage of being the only Texas school in the SEC or the only school in Texas and Oklahoma. So they're going to lose all that goodwill, all that advantage that they built over the years. I don't think that's necessarily the case. So, again, we'll see when and if, because right now, here's another question, and I know this is kind of going off of what you specifically asked, but if you're Steve Sarkisian and Lincoln Riley right now, we don't know exactly when these two teams are going to join the SEC. Now, as Brent said, and I agree with him, I think it's going to be as soon as next year. but they can't tell recruits that with a 100% certainty. So when you go into a recruit's home, do you say, okay, well, right now we're in the works on getting us to the SEC by next year? Or do you because they're not going to know if they're going to be playing in the Big 12 or the SEC in 2022.
Yeah.
From that perspective, just from a recruiting standpoint, it's pretty crazy. From beefing up the SEC, nobody's going to hold a candle, because I'm not just specifically talking about football, because Texas has been kind of on the lower rung of that in the last few years, but across the board in athletics is going to be just incredible.
Here's my take, and it's the second part of that question, and it goes into the fact of, now if you look at where is the regional powers of college football, you have the West Coast, you have the Northeast, Midwest with the Big Ten, and you have the Southeast. I grew up, and I know, Brent, a lot of times you've talked about growing up, watching the A&M and Texas game, and that being the game and the thing that people care about the most down here. I grew up, my dad went to Tech, my mom went to SMU. I grew up watching college football games and caring about what did Tech do, how did Tech beat Baylor, how did Texas beat Oklahoma, the region of the middle of the country, and especially the state of Texas, for whatever reason through the years, just can't keep that regionality that makes college football so great. If you want to talk about the breakdown of the Southwest Conference, if you want to talk about now the breakdown of the Big 12, and it's a little bit sad for me. I know Texas and A&M carry the brunt of the alumni bases in the state, but it's a little bit sad for me that you still don't get at the high level that regionality of the state of Texas in football moving forward. And this just does a little bit more to tear that apart. And Brent, I know you've been covering this a lot more. Does it solely fall in the lap of what people want to say, and that is the University of Texas's greed or perceived control over what happens in the state and what happens with the schools that surround it? Why can't anyone seem to keep that regionality around the state of Texas in the middle of the country, like all the other quadrants of the country have been able to somewhat keep?
Yeah, there's no doubt that Texas in the past, first in the Southwest Conference and then in the Big 12, tried to act like it ran the show. And sometimes, and oftentimes, I guess you could say it did. I do believe there's some new leaders in place at Texas and so forth that realize they're just going to be a part of the equation in the SEC. I do think they realize that. I don't think they think they're going to go into the SEC and start trying to run things. They'll get laughed right back out of the South is what would happen in that situation. I also don't think that Texas and Oklahoma, to a little bit of a lesser degree, should be made to feel bad for propping up these other schools. I mean, I have an affinity for Baylor. I've covered a lot of events over the years there and have seen what they've built up along the Brazos and wish them the best and everything. But why is it they should have to depend on these other two programs to prop them up as well? Because those programs are going to do what they have to do what's best for them. So Texas shouldn't be made to feel guilty like that. Texas is trying to do what's best for Texas in this situation. And I really do hope Baylor, TCU, Tech, the other schools in the state land on their feet, or somehow merge with the Pac-12 or whatever it takes to keep playing some, high level sports, particularly football in those situations. But yeah, Texas has, I've heard the stories over the years where those guys that were in charge, you talk about DeLoss Dodds, for instance, he was there and played so long as the athletic director, where if they didn't decide things, they thought they decided things. It's why Nebraska left. It's why the Aggies used the Longhorn Network as an excuse to get out. But I do think the Longhorns and the Sooners, who've never been quite to that level in terms of the arrogance and whatever you want to call it, I do think they realize they're part of something much bigger with the SEC, and that they're not going to be able to step in and start acting like they run the show by any means. Not even years from now. Not next year, and not 10 years from now either.
Let's close out with this. We'll move on to the fact that today is the first day of A&M fall camp for football. So we actually do have football to cover. It's not just all COVID and realignment around these parts. Brent, we'll start with you. What is the biggest storyline that you're looking forward to in fall camp heading into the season?
the old COVID and realignment hook. You know what? Gosh, yeah,
it's my new stand-up series.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah, it is nice to be able to. I've said this for a while now. This summer, I'm really, and I think I maybe say this every summer, but I really mean it this year. I really look forward to the stability and day-by-day routine of game weeks, because you kind of know you have a schedule and everything, and it's all kind of haywire of late. And now we've got the variant to deal with, as you mentioned, with COVID, as part of your comedy series there, along with
Ian and Bo Burnham.
Yeah, I know it's not
cracking everyone up.
I'd like to say, obviously, as the simpleton football fan or whatever, I want to keep an eye on quarterback, and I think you've got two really good options. Jimbo has talked about both. He thinks both those guys are going to be in the NFL, and from what I've seen, I believe him, like in terms of Haynes King and Zach Calzada. But really, what it comes down to, the success of this team this year, it's going to come down to that offensive line. They're going to be fine on defense with all the super seniors off of defense from last year. You didn't lose a whole lot there. I think you're going to be fine at quarterback because you're going to be able to hand off to Spiller and a chain. It all comes down to, how's that offensive line going to hold up? Because if you remember, y'all remember last year, those guys were so maligned at this time. Boy, this offensive line just hasn't been very good. And then as seniors, as fourth and fifth year guys, they did a really good job. Now you're talking about almost a whole new set outside of Kenyon Green over at left tackle. You feel like he's going to be just fine in protecting the quarterback's blind side. 4 out of 5 new guys. That's the biggest thing to keep an eye on, although it's much more glamorous to say, keep an eye on this quarterback battle.
Alex?
Yeah, putting those two things together, can A&M figure things out at quarterback? Can that offensive line come together? How does that translate onto the field, and can A&M take that next step? A&M went 9-1 last year. They were one spot away from getting to the college football playoff, had a case to be in that top 4. A&M has a pretty good draw this year as far as scheduling goes. You're going to have to play Alabama, but you get them at home and you get them in the middle of the season when, you've had a few games to get that offensive line into shape and have a few games, whether it's Haynes King or Zach Calzada under their belt. So can A&M kind of take that next step and actually contend for a championship for second straight year? That's kind of my question as the Aggies start fall camp.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be keeping an eye on all of that. Quarterback, obviously, O-line, like you said, that's probably the biggest question mark coming in. I want to see who is going to really assert themselves and become that number 1 wide receiver. I think Jalen Wademeyer is still going to be the top target for whoever is QB, whether that be Haynes King or Zach Calzada. But who's going to be the deep threat? Because that's something that Texas A&M has been missing in years, is that ability for the deep ball, making big explosive plays. That's what you see teams like Alabama doing all the time. Who is going to be that guy for A&M? Can it be Caleb Chapman? We saw glimpses of that before he went down after that Florida game. Can it be Chase Lane? Could it even be Damon Demas, who everybody, very heralded coming in? Has he finally gotten over that learning curve, and is he ready to really be able to put his athletic prowess on display? Or could it be somebody else? Maybe somebody that we're not even talking about at this point, that by the end of the year are going to be like, of course, that guy's the number 1. So I want to keep an eye on that. I also want to look at the linebacking core, because Billy Lucci and I were talking about this whenever hosting the Bellucci Hour on the Zone. I need to do a shameless plug, as you guys were talking about other things. So I'm hosting the Bellucci Hour now. It's back, and so we had our second episode last night, and Billy and I were talking about this linebacking core and how deep it is. When you look across the board, and Billy's thinking this is the deepest that this linebacking core has been since A&M entered the SEC. Now it has been kind of shallow at times, but I mean, you look at Aaron Hansford, obviously is your leading dog coming back in, but you got a lot of other guys. Andre White is a guy. Edrin Cooper is another player. I mean, you've got some really good depth there with some talented guys. So I want to see how that linebacking core starts to come together under Tyler Santucci this year.
Well, since basically y'all took them all, I'll go a little bit out of left field in the fact that they're going to name a new 12th man this year. And what a year to be named a new 12th man when name, image, likeness and stuff is put into play, because you're going to be a walk-on that really might not see a whole lot of playing time, but you're probably going to have some opportunities to make a few dollars because you are the 12th man. And so whoever gets named that each iteration, that's going to mean money. There's a little bit something more to fight for with that. So that's something that'll interest me. Hey guys, what's the same between COVID and the SEC inviting Texas and Oklahoma?
I don't know.
Both have a large just lack of taste. So anyway, we'll close it out with that.
Hey, so what? I got a question. With the 12th man, would he be like sponsored by Hurricane Harry's or something like that?
If Harry's got into it.
Would that tie in together?
Or how about ask who you would be sponsored by, Brent?
Yeah.
Probably Fox, there's no doubt. Circa 93, Huntsville, Texas.
I'm just thinking, with the 12th man lager, Karbach, right? I mean, that seems like that would be pretty simple. Have the 12th man holding a 12th man lager.
Can't do
if he's of age. Oh, that's right. You can't do alcohol. That's right.
Can't do alcohol, yeah.
Hey, Zach, is that a giant dill pickle in the background?
It sure is. That's my big pickle.
Is that your NIL?
That's my big W. That's what I got payment for. I don't actually get paid to do radio. I'm just up here all the time.
Somewhere we have a picture of who is it? Who is it that did the podcast who retired, medically retired from the football team?
With
all due respect. Who is that guy?
Why did I just forget?
Justin Dunning?
Why did I just forget?
Did we get a picture with Justin Dunning with the pickle? Uh-oh. We had it going, man, and then he froze up. Okay, you back?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It was the dump button. It dumped me for what I was saying. So anyway, we need to shut this thing down because apparently my internet connection is unstable. So thanks everyone for joining us. This is another episode of the My Aggie Nation podcast. Thank you, Brent. So for Alex Miller and Zach Taylor, the new Faja, I'm Travis Brown. This is the My Aggie Nation podcast. We'll see you next week.
It seems like every day, everything just has a way to burst at the seams. But if we don't watch what we're doing, our hearts will get ruined by silly things. Good love ain't easy, girl, we know that's true. And if we want to keep it, we gotta watch everything that we do, yeah. Don't wanna make sure, my baby, make sure you're sticking with me. Don't wanna make sure that we'll be all that we can be, all that we can be, all